Welcome back to the channel. My name is Adam Smith, and inside this video I am very excited to be going on an adventure with all of you in the Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era from Chip Theory Games. This is a cooperative tabletop adventure where the Order of the Black Worm is plotting to secure the Amulet of Kings. And as the Dark Cult schemes, however, one of its members is planning an even darker betrayal, one that will tie Tamriel in with oblivion forever. Each adventure in the game takes place over the course of 3 gameplay sessions, and players can customize and control a single hero throughout the entire 3 sessions, or if you're playing solo like I am, you can control things multi-handed. I've chosen to control 2 characters. Now, as you adventure onwards towards your ultimate goal of a given session, which we'll talk more about as we get into gameplay, you're also going to gain experience points, and these are going to allow you to upgrade and customize your characters that you're controlling, or maybe character if you're playing true solo. So there is a lot to dive into on the character creation side of this game, and you can create some very unique and interesting builds. Now, before I go any further, let's go ahead and make sure that everybody is on the same page. Now, the very first thing I'll say is that if you are a brand new player to this game, you've never heard, seen, or understand anything around gameplay and setup, you're definitely going to want to check out the Dized app. That app is going to take you through all the steps of setup to get the game to the table if you actually have the game in hand. And even if you don't have the game in hand, the Dized app is still a fantastic learning tool to walk through, and it doesn't cost anything to get into that specific tutorial. You can find it inside of their app. Go through that, and once you're done all those 3 days, you're going to come out the other side and you will have something that looks fairly close to what I've got set up here, which is on the opposite side of that Dized tutorial. The other crowd of individuals may have already played this game. There's lots out there that have already, and if you're those individuals, you already know the rules and you can stay along for the ride right now. Now, for those new players wondering where to go, this is the app you need to open up. Once you're inside, go to this tutorial right here. You're going to click on the tutorial button. You're going to hit play. It will download 277 megabytes worth of data onto your phone, which is the tutorial in and of itself. And then once it's done downloading, you'll go ahead and click begin or start. And that's going to take you through the steps. And it's going to be in a horizontal fashion here. So you can see it's unpacking it, for instance. And again, this hopefully will be helpful for those that are trying to catch up to where I am right now. Now, as you can see, the tutorial breaks into intro, day 1, day 2, day 3, and then it gets into free play. And free play is exactly where I am set up on the game table right now. My party is made up of 2 individuals, an Argonian and a Dark Elf. On the left here, the Argonian is a Dark Knight. That is the class sheet that's right here. This is going to be tied to an effect on your actual character dashboard. We'll talk about how that all works a little bit later. Up top, we got skill sheets. There's a number of these. Now, the Dized tutorial will hand you the combat one and the one hand and shield. You'll have those ones to start. And then as you go through gameplay, you'll be able to add new skills to your character. Again, customizing them as you wish. And you'll see that those skills will appear based on their logo icon in specific spots on the map where there is an area to do so. And we'll talk more about how all that works later on, but essentially I still have some open slots to put some more skills in the future. The one I chose so far is Shadow. And my Argonian has a resistance here, which is mentioned right in the middle of its sheet. It also has its health, stamina, magicka, combat, and cooldown. We'll talk more about these stats in a little bit, but they, of course, tie into what's going on here on the character dashboard. And then to the right, the Dark Elf. Here's my Dark Elf stats on the very bottom. We got the health, stamina, magicka, combat, and cooldown. Again, they all tie to what's going on over here on the dashboard. So you'll see health, for instance, here. You've got stamina here. Again, the colors tie together. You got magicka, and then, of course, you get into the skills of what this character has. Let's take a look at the skills the Dark Elf has and what class I've selected. Per the Dized tutorial, I was given the combat skill set, very much like the Argonian, but I also got a unique one, and that was the Destruction Staff, opening up magicka-based dice, which I have here in my player board. And then also, I went ahead later on and picked up the skill Acrobatics, giving me, and also, of course, I had to pay XP in order to gain these dice, but these dice now slotted in, which will help me out on movement-based abilities. Should be very beneficial. And the class of my Dark Elf is a Sorcerer on the Novice side, and has a number of different things I can take advantage of, like power surges, lightning splashes, unholy knowledge, dark exchanges, and blood magic. You'll see some of these in play as we get into gameplay. Now, both of my characters can equip up to 4 items. We can have an inventory worth of other stuff, but for now, I don't even have the maxes on that front. I do have weapons for both the characters, which is nice, a sword here and a restoration staff, and then down below, we pick some things up along the way. Now, the two that are very important are these two right here, and the reason for that is these are considered legendary items, and these legendary items are necessary as they tie into the overarching quest I'm going after. There's also another type of item inside the game known as a common item in green, and one of those is actually being held by the Argonian. Now let's get everybody on the same page and talk about the overall objective of session number 1 here. As we go through the Black Marsh, we need the Gazetteer, which is a booklet that corresponds to the region. Depending on which region you've selected to play, there will be a booklet that you'll use as you go through. Black Marsh may seem swampy and inhospitable, but it has hidden charms for those who are willing to look. Though most of the region belongs to the Ebenhard Pact, there are many who live in the province's remote interior who pay no heed to such matters, particularly many of the isolated Argonian tribes who have called Black Marsh home for millennia. Those not well equipped to journey through the region may find it rough going, as the weather frequently combines with the marshy landscape to make what few thoroughfares exist in the province all but impassable. Lately, word has spread that one or more unknown parties are investigating the mystical flora that shape Argonians' understanding of the world and perhaps even the worlds beyond this one. And speaking of the rough going inside the Black Marsh, the actual weather does change as you go through the region, and as you go through each day, towards the end of the day, there will be a check to determine whether the weather is going to shift. And in my case, at the end of day number 3, it switched from sunny to rainy, as you can see marked in the bottom right-hand corner of the region sheet. My party currently resides at the Black Hole Prison, which is right here. You can see the marker denoting it, and down in the bottom right-hand corner, Lilmoth is the location where my adventure began. Over the course of 3 days through the Dized tutorial, I've moved across a number of hexes to this location, and we're moving into day number 4 in just a moment, but I do want to show you the overarching objective and quest that's tied to this. As mentioned during the Dized tutorial, it told us to go to A21, Curators of Chaos, inside of the Gazetteer for the Black Marsh, and it has a session snapshot here that says, traverse the map to participate in a long delve, which can be shortened by making a stop in another city. It also shows the starting location, which I talked about before, is Lilmoth, which is where my party marker originally started, and I've now traversed my way. We've traveled to the Black Rose Prison. Curators of Chaos states that you picked up a contract with the Cyrodiil Collections, a historical society attempting to open a museum of Argonian artifacts in the Black Marsh. The society is searching for a relic that is particularly hard to obtain, so they have hired the services of the Undaunted to bring it back to light. Anything else you plunder in the process, of course, is yours to keep. The artifact in question is an ancient Argonian tome said to contain wisdom about how to harness a rare natural resource native to Black Marsh. Cyrodiil Collections has learned that the book is located in a complex cave system below the city of Stormhold. The organization is light on details, but there are a few historians scattered throughout the region who might be able to help. So when we started the Dized app and went through the first 3 days, we need as a main objective to get from Lilmoth all the way to Stormhold, which is the very north point of Black Marsh. And we need to do this by day 12, as the day counter, which is on the left there in the teal color on the black tray, has only 12 days total. So we need to make sure we get to Stronghold in that time frame in order to pull off that final encounter. Now, as the flavor text alluded to, alternatively, we can choose to research the caves below Stormhold first by traveling to Stone Waste or Percolating Mire and completing a town encounter, which is recommended we do it by day 6. Now, you'll see the 2 locations it's talking about marked with the objective markers. So we've got objective markers on not only the primary one we're focused on, but the alternative ones as well. Now, it's also worth mentioning that I do have a side quest I can potentially go after if I wish, called Mercs and Scales. You can read this if you wish, but essentially if we go to the eastmost conflict landmark and initiate the following clash for that day's encounter, we can go after this individual here. To better understand the Overland map, in the top left-hand corner there is a map key, which will certainly help you with the icons across the Black Marsh. You'll see Town, Peaceful, Conflict, and Unstable. These are all encounters that you'll come across as you traverse across with your party marker. Now, as we just read in the side quest here, it told us that in the eastmost location that has a conflict landmark, that is where we're going to find that individual to try and go after that side quest. The eastmost conflict encounter landmark is found right here at Camp Merciful Reduction. So that side quest is something to think about we can tackle in the future, but for now we're going to transition from day 3 to day 4. This is going to take us into the phases of a day, which I'll walk you through. The very first phase is called the New Day phase. The first thing we do is increase the day dial. We're currently on day number 3. You can see the 3 is next to the dash in the very center of the black tray. So we're going to rotate this so 4 is shown. Simple as that. And the dial to the right of it is the Party XP dial, which currently sits in this session after 3 full days, now moving into the 4th day at a total of 8 XP. The round counter die is below it, currently sitting with the die icon face up because we're not counting any rounds right now, but you'll see how that works later on. And if you're familiar with Too Many Bones, it'll certainly make a lot of sense. Now, if you're incrementing this and it's currently on 12, well, when it rotates past 12, you have failed the guild quest. That's currently not a problem for us. We have a number of days left to complete the guild quest. Now, as you saw earlier, when we're looking inside the Gazetteer for the Black Marsh, the A21 Couriers of Chaos, it mentioned the keyword Undaunted. This is tied to the guild card, which has some flavor text on it. And if we flip this over to the opposite side, the guild will provide a benefit here as we're pledged to it for this guild quest. So it says, for your guild kiosk town action, discard all items in the shop and refill it with new items equal to the shop's values, then gain 1 item from the new selection. So this is something to be aware of and keep an eye on. The New Day phase is done. We go to the Overland phase, and here we get to move our party marker and actually traverse across this Overland map. So we have up to 3 movement by default, but the weather gauge will impact how much movement your party can actually have dependent on the weather, and you'll find that information in the Gazetteer. So for this Black Marsh location, when it's sunny, the default of 3 still applies. You can move quite quickly, but when it's rainy, you can only move 2 positions at a time, so that's worth mentioning. So we can only move 2 hexes, and we could just go 1 and stop there. But wherever we end our movement, we have to do set encounter, which is under the token, unless, of course, we end our movement in a space that's completely blank. Now, the game allows mitigation for the Overland map. In other words, if you wish to try to get more out of this particular phase, you can take light fatigue, which is one of the dice, which will add into the cooldown track on the furthest rightmost position for each of the characters in the party. So in other words, everyone takes a light fatigue, which is a gray one, to move 1 extra space beyond what you normally could. So in this case, because it's rainy, I can move 2 hexes, but if I really wanted to move 3, say for instance, I really wanted to get to a particular encounter or a particular town or something like that, I can take light fatigue over and over again in order to push myself to get there. Now, the downside is this light fatigue will sit in your cooldown track, and that's going to affect you getting dice back into your player board, and that will certainly gum things up if you press too hard on that. But like everything inside of the Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era, there's mitigation to literally almost every gameplay element. So even when you're taking fatigue or over fatigue inside your cooldown tracks at the bottom of your character's boards, you can literally find ways to deal with it. So there are many different ins and outs to the gameplay. So don't get caught up in thinking one specific way. You might be able to strategize and push yourself quite heavily during the Overland section in order to use something that you might have equipped, or maybe some type of an ability or something that will allow you to clear your cooldown track quicker. Now, speaking about light fatigue in the cooldown track, here's a look at my Argonium, which actually has a number of fatigue already. Light fatigue, as well as a combat die buried in between some, sitting in my cooldown track. Now, as you go through gameplay, various things like resting or going through rounds of combat, for instance, are going to have you go and look at your cooldown marker here, and it'll tell you how many dice are being removed from the left side, and things will shuffle down. Eventually, you'll replenish dice that are trapped in here and get them back in. There's other gameplay ways to get these dice out of here, too. You can exercise things like the guild card. You can exercise a number of different abilities in the game to get this thing to clear out. But as you can see right now, it might not be a wise decision for me to go ahead and use more light fatigue just filling up this row, because if I go into a combat and start using my good dice, they'll end up towards the back end of the cooldown track, meaning it'll take quite some time for me to get them back. Because my cooldown marker is currently at 2, I'm not replenishing a ton every single turn during battles. Now, while we're on the topic of the cooldown track and the cooldown stat, let's go ahead and warp back in time. We're going to go back to the point at the beginning of this video where I was at the end of day number 3 before I moved the day marker to day number 4, which we are right now. And at that point, at the very end of day number 3, at the end of every day, you have the opportunity for the adventurer to rest. And at that point in time, depending on the difficulty level of the game, you can actually replenish some dice from the cooldown track. If you're at the apprentice level of difficulty, it's the easiest. Adventurers get to remove 2 dice from their cooldown track and also heal for 2 HP, again up to their maximum. Now at the adept level, which is the average difficulty, adventurers get to remove 1 die from their cooldown track and heal for 1 HP during this step. And if you're at expert, which is the hardest difficulty, you gain 2 fatigue for each additional engage action taken in battle. So basically it's just going to pump things up and make things a lot tougher on you. Now in this case for me, I am playing based on the Dized app, which had us starting at the apprentice. So that means 2 of these dice are going to be coming out of the track right now for the adventure rest. So 2 dice come out from the far left-hand side. All the rest of the dice shuffle on down the row, and you can see we're getting closer and closer to obtaining that combat die. And when I get it back, it will go in this slot right here. Fatigue dice, when they're removed from the cooldown track, are going to go right back to the actual dice boxes. They don't go anywhere else on your player mat. And we'll do the exact same thing over here with the Dark Elf, removing 2, and they'll go back to the dice tray. Now also during the adventure rest, which happens at the end of a day, so we're pretending right now that it's the end of day number 3 still, we're going to go ahead and increase the health to its maximum. So the health for my character is 4 by default, but I have actually increased it, the attribute, by 1. So I've got 1 red peg in there, which means my total health is 5. Now we take a look at the chips underneath of my character, which is currently at 5, so no extra health here. It's a different story over here for this character, as I've got 5 by default plus an additional 1 as an attribute bump, and that means 6. And currently underneath of this, I've only got 5, so we're actually going to gain 1 here. Again, at the apprentice level of difficulty during the adventure rest, you're getting 2 health back, but again, only up to your maximum, so I only get 1 in this case. So now you should have a much better understanding of how light fatigue can be added into your cooldown track if you choose to push yourself on the Overland map, and better yet, how you can actually potentially get it out of your track. The end of every day will have a rest step. You'll also have opportunities based on your cooldown stat to be able to get those dice out of there during combat, and of course other game effects will come into play, but now you can see the connection between things. So we warp back in time to the beginning of day number 4 here, where we can actually do some movement on this Overland map. So because it's raining, I can move up to 2 hexes. I can push myself with light fatigue if I want to go further. Now there's a number of icons around me I could potentially interact with. On the left there is a peaceful encounter. On the right, there is an unstable encounter. And then just north to me, all these one position away, there is a town. Now, just to give you an idea of the connection of components to the different icons on the Overland map, if I chose to end my movement on a peaceful encounter, I'm grabbing that Thief in the Night card. If I'm going to be going for a conflict encounter, I'll be grabbing that red card. I'm going to use one of the 2 movement I have for this Overland phase to head to the north to the Dead Winter Village and check it out. And you'll find all the towns listed inside the Black Marsh Gazetteer. Deadwater Village is home to the Deadwater tribe of Argonians, known primarily among other Argonians for their militarism and isolationism. Despite the reputation, the Dead Winter will give a cautious welcome to those who treat their ways with respect. It states underneath, camp under the stars. At the start of this encounter, if the weather is sunny, which is not, it's actually rainy, each adventurer may remove all dice from their cooldown track and heal to full HP. That would have been nice to be able to take advantage of, but unfortunately the weather said otherwise. Now you'll notice a number of icons inside of the town. The ones that are grayed out are not available, or if they're marked closed, for instance. So you'll see here the inn is closed, the guild kiosk is closed, so we cannot interact with those. But up here we'll start with the necessities, where we have a common item of 3 pool and a legendary pool of 2. Deadwater has the following items available: 2 legendaries across the top, Conjurer's Potion and Ancient Dragon Guard Burial Mask, which looks absolutely awesome. Across the bottom, the common items are the Quicksilver Dagger, the Wolf Pelt, and the Heavy Red Tincture. Now, something else that can be available in towns are trainers. You'll see them up in the top right-hand corner. In this case, there are 2 available, so we simply go to the draw bag. We're going to pull 2 skill tokens out at random. So I've got the matching draw bag. Let's go ahead and draw 2 out and see what is available here. Might be something of interest to either of my characters. Let's go ahead. We got 2 of them in hand. We got this one here and this one here. The skill line token on the left is for the heavy armor, and the one on the right is for two-handed. So I've grabbed the skill line reference sheets so you can actually see what benefits they could potentially provide. And it's a good way to take a quick look to see what might fit or suit your characters, as they're going to have to make choices inside of this village or town, as they have 2 actions to spend. So one of the actions you might take as a character is to shop, taking one of the drawn item cards we looked at earlier. Or you might want to train as an action, which allows you to take one of the drawn skill lines. Again, you get the token as well as a reference sheet, but you don't get any dice for it. You've just simply trained that skill line and it goes into your dashboard as a token. Other things you can do is have an action at the inn, although in this particular location it's closed, but if it is open, you can heal to max HP, clear the whole cooldown, and recover all drained dice. Now, this would have been nice to be able to do because I've got a lot of fatigue. Well, not tons anymore, but enough that it might have been worth an action, but I still can't do it right now. The quest board allows you to draw 2 side quests, similar to the one I showed you earlier, but you draw 2 from the town, you get to choose one, and you discard all the rest. As an action, the guild quest can be used in order to take a unique guild town action. Of course, you take the action based on your guild card, which I showed you earlier is on the right there in the middle. But as of right now, the guild kiosk is closed, so I can't do that. The town square action is also something you can do. And again, it's listed down there at the very bottom. It's martial history. The other thing you can do as an action is the alchemy station. So if you happen to have a potion item card that you've drained or expended, you can actually replenish that at this station. So that's something I could do, but I currently don't have any that I've actually expended. I actually do have a potion on my Dark Elf at the moment, but it is not expended. And as you can see, it's really easy to identify icons in the game as they tie to the iconography you'll see throughout the game. So if I happen to expend this particular one, which has the expend keyword on it, this one allows me to automatically succeed at a lockpick check without rolling any dice. A really handy one to use in the future. And I didn't need to do it during my previous plays, but if I do in the future, I'll certainly be using this and then come back to an alchemy station in order to replenish it to use it again in the future. My Argonian is going to take an action in order to train. I really like this heavy armor on her. I think it's going to be a nice benefit for her. So she's going to go ahead and take this skill line. Now, if she does, she has to place it into an empty slot she has available. There's currently only 2. And the thing to think about when you're actually building out your character is not only where you're going to slot that in on whichever side you want, but what's more important is what's on the opposite side, as of course that's going to cap what it can do. In other words, if I left this entire top row open, for instance, I could literally, every time I gain a bunch of XP, and as over the course of the game you will see this, you can actually spend in order to up your attributes. So I could put more of these red tokens in here, working my way across, and you pay based on the XP value shown in white when you're moving from left to right across, and from right to left you look at the black values, but essentially it goes 1 1 2 2 3 3 no matter which direction you're going, and that's how much XP you're going to spend. Now XP doesn't matter right now, but the reason the planning aspect matters is because if I choose that I really want to have a high HP level with this character and I'm spending XP, I might be putting a lot of these red tokens in, and that means if I put a skill line token over here now or in the future, and I've got red tokens all the way to here, let's say, I've only got 1 space available for 1 die from that skill line. So you need to think about how far along you're going to be pushing each of your skills before you place another in the same row. Now, on the opposite side of the coin, you don't need to understand absolutely everything about your future plans in order to just go ahead and train. But the one thing to keep in mind is the fact that these things will eventually meet in the middle somewhere, and you get to determine how that pans out. Also, if you don't like a particular skill line, or it doesn't work well with your character, or you want to make an adjustment, you always have the ability to untrain as part of gameplay. But we're in the train section right now, so we're going to go ahead and train for heavy armor, and I have to select which line I want it to tie into. And honestly, I'm thinking that this character will be up close and personal more often, so I think I'll be pushing up his health over time more so, and it's tough. And stamina is really useful too because he needs to get up close and personal, so maybe I'm going to go ahead and probably place it here. So that's a train action, all done, and I also get that skill line reference sheet which adds into what I've got built out for the character, continuing to get more interesting as it goes along. I was tempted to have the Dark Elf take the other skill line, but I think I'm going to hold off on it for now, and we're going to go into another action here. What I'm thinking of doing for the Dark Elf is potentially going after a common or legendary item. My Dark Elf is happy to take the wolf pelt as it aligns really well with the battle form that it is currently in and usually is in, based on it wanting to try and use its magicka. So we're going to go with this one. It says when you would gain a status die, if you're in that battle form, you may choose to gain 1 light fatigue instead of a status die. That can be very helpful, especially when enemies are throwing status dies that you do not want to get. A light fatigue is a lot better. Now, during the town encounter, you can take the same action twice. The only one you can't take twice is the town square action. The Dark Elf's going to take another item from the shop, taking the Ancient Dragon Guard Burial Mask. Now, strategy-wise, I had the Dark Elf take that mask on purpose to be able to trade to the Argonian in the future, because I think the Argonian would definitely benefit from it. And another item I think the Argonian is going to benefit from as a second action is going to go shopping and taking this Quicksilver Dagger. This is great because I have this Shadow skill, and that is going to pair with the status die of Stealth, which I do have in my Argonian track here. And if it ever ends up as a Stealth status die in my cooldown track, which it certainly will based on how I've played in the past already, I get to add 3 enemy combat dice to my engage, which should be huge. If I want to overtax, essentially toss this thing, you get an additional benefit. It says before performing the engage, you gain a stealth status die, and it is not removed after dealing damage this engage, but then the item would be gone. And that's going to do it for the town encounter. We can close up the Gazetteer. That's going to do it for the encounter phase. We've gone through the New Day phase, Overland phase, and encounter phase as part of day number 4. And we continue now to what's known as the reward phase. And in this one, we gain rewards from successful encounters like XP, items, keywords. We increase the XP dial if we gained anything. So you might actually gain XP as doing something inside of a town. You might gain it when you're doing a peaceful encounter or potentially a conflict or an unstable encounter. There's many ways to gain XP at this point. You'd now be able to go ahead and spend it. Now, I'm not going to touch on all the aspects of this now because I don't have any to spend. We'll cover this a little later on. Now, if the encounter you dealt with is an unstable landmark, meaning it's one of these explosion-looking icons on the map, then you're going to gain 2 tenacity for each of the characters in your party. Now, the tenacity track is on the bottom right-hand corner of every player board, just above the cooldown track. In my case here for the Dark Elf, it's currently at 1, actually. If I have none at all, it's down to 0. But I do have 1, and when you have it, you're able to use it across your class card, which specifically will tell you how much tenacity it takes in order to actually use it. Now, as you roll dice throughout the game, you're going to notice the tenacity icon, which looks like this, and it also looks like this icon around all kinds of dice faces. So basically, when you roll what would normally be a blank result on the die, it ends up being tenacity, which ends up tying into this track as you gain it, and then of course you can spend it to trigger these different class abilities that can be very fun. The power surge over here says spend any amount of additional tenacity. Choose an adventure to recover the leftmost number of dice from their cooldown track equal to the additional amount spent. That is really handy. So for all the light fatigue I have sitting on the Argonian currently, I could go ahead right now, or really for any dice inside the cooldown track, if I had a lot of tenacity, which I don't, I could right now just go ahead and spend 1 to trigger this, but then I couldn't actually go ahead and remove any from the cooldown track because I need to have more than 1 to be able to start pecking away at the dice in the other player's cooldown track. But let's say I hypothetically had 5. I could spend 1 to trigger this thing, and then I could spend all 4 of the rest in order to take 4 dice from the cooldown track, which would essentially drain the whole thing right out and replenish that combat die that's stuck in there. So tenacity can be very beneficial. Continuing on through the reward phase in terms of things you can do, you can untrain. We talked about this earlier. So each adventurer can untrain and remove at no XP cost any skill lines they wish and skill dice or stat tokens to make room for other advancements. So it's worth noting that that is the way you can essentially pivot on any of your builds as you go along. As part of the reward phase, you can gain advancements, so each adventurer can spend XP on advancements as they choose. Now, it's worth noting an adventurer's saved XP cannot exceed 3. At the end of the reward phase, each unspent XP in excess of 3 increases your tenacity tracker by 1 up to that track's maximum. So each adventurer can spend XP on advancements or complete any other advancements gained from the encounter's rewards. Saved XP must be spent, though, whether gained from this encounter or unspent from previous encounters. So long story short, you could gain, say for instance, 4 XP, which would have your tracker on your dashboard for your character maxing out beyond the 3 it shows. So for example, let's say we came out of a delve encounter and we got 4 XP. So we go ahead, we max out our XP counter here to 3. We know we have an additional one as well. And what would end up happening is if we chose at the end of the rewards phase not to use any XP whatsoever, we'd have an additional one off to the side. So that would be converted to tenacity. So we would then go down to the very bottom of our track here and we would upgrade our tenacity by 1. Now, if we choose to go ahead and spend XP as per normal to gain advancements, we have the full pool of all the XP that we gained to this point right then. So I'd have 4. I could spend that to upgrade additional dice or different attributes. And then of course I would tick things down. Once I spent the 1 XP, which was 1 and above this, I would then start spending the 3 that's on the track until I have absolutely none left. And currently I don't have any anyway, so nothing to do. The final step of the rewards phase is to make any notes you might want to make on the campaign journal. You don't have to, but there's spots here to not only mark things as you go along, but also to make notes on the opposite side. That'll do it for the rewards phase. We now move into the end of day phase where we activate the province effect. That's going to tie into the weather gauge in the bottom right hand corner of the overland map, currently set to rainy. We're going to find out whether the weather is going to change at all. Now, if we had a peaceful encounter as part of our day, we're going to reference the icon on the back of that encounter card. However, if we didn't have a peaceful encounter, we're going to draw the top peaceful encounter, flip it over, and take a look at the icon at the bottom. This is what a peaceful encounter looks like based on the eye symbol on the card. The first one drawn, you flip it over to the opposite side, ignore absolutely everything on the front and back except for this icon down here at the very bottom. You might not even see an icon. Based on the region that you're in, you'll take a look inside the Gazetteer. In the first couple pages, you'll find the overland mechanics, giving you all the information you need to know. Based on the icon that we just saw, which is this one right here, it's going to be setting of the weather to sunny, and we move specific tokens, which we don't have in play right now, so we don't have to worry about. But we know right now we're going from rainy to sunny, so I'm moving that token right now on the weather gauge, which has been updated. You'll also see how much movement is allocated. So for sunny, we get a base movement of 3. If it's rainy, it's 2, which we just had in the prior day, or the day we're currently in, I should say. And then for flooding, the party's base overland movement's only 2, and when gaining fatigue to continue overland movement, so when you're pushing yourself while it's flooding, adventurers have to gain over fatigue, which is a black die, instead of the light gray fatigue die. Long story short around the over fatigue is essentially it's a lot more painful and will stick around for a little bit longer. Now we might as well tie this into the equation because this is the final card in play that I have not talked about yet, which was pulled into the equation as part of the Dized app, and you can see a reminder of it right here at the beginning of the Gazetteer for the Black Marsh. It tells us at the start of the session, find the Delve card, the Submerged Chamber card, and do not shuffle it into the Delve deck, but make sure it's accessible because another Delve card might instruct you to shuffle this card into the deck. So this is essentially just placed to the side for now. You've seen this in the shots throughout so far, but it's not coming into play until called upon. The final thing to do at the end of day phase is exactly what you think. It's to rest. Your adventurers get to rest at this point, as I reverse time earlier in the video to show you what an adventure rest was like, at least partially for the end of day 3. You now get to see it in its entirety here at the end of day number 4. There's actually a couple other things you can do during this step. As you know, we're on the apprentice level of difficulty, so 2 dice coming out of the cooldown track, which is awesome news, which allows us to potentially get these things back very, very quickly now, as it's within the 2 that I have for the cooldown marker, which is awesome for that stat. And next, we get to up 2 HP on our character if we have maximum available, which we currently don't. We're already at 6. And over here with the Dark Elf, 3 fatigue left, 2 of them coming out, which remains just a single fatigue, light. An optional thing you can do, and I'm certainly going to do it based on the strategy I talked about before, and that is to do an exchange between adventurers. So I'm going to choose to move the Ancient Dragon Guard Burial Mask over from the Dark Elf to the Argonian, which is perfect because now both of them are going to have a total of 4 items, which is the default maximum that they can have equipped at any given time. And it's worth mentioning you can have an inventory of items beyond these. These are just the ones that are actively equipped. And at this point, if I wanted to use the Guild Assist, I could choose to do so, but I do not want to use it right now, so we'll just continue on to day 5. We begin day 5 by moving the day counter from 4 to 5. And we now head into the Overland phase. I want to push towards one of the alternate objectives, which is to go into the Stone Waste Town, so it's only 3 hexes away, which is perfect, as it's currently sunny weather, so we have up to 3 movement. Now, if your party marker lands on a hex that has multiple things that you can trigger, in this case, I'm on 2. I've got a guild quest encounter here I can do, which is the token sitting on this town. And I also have the town encounter itself. Now, things go in order in terms of which triggers. So first off, the guild quest encounters take precedence, then side quests, followed by towns or overland encounters. So let's head inside the Gazetteer for the guild quest and find out what happens next. You'll remember earlier in the video we read an entry inside the Gazetteer for the guild quest. It had a quest objective section, and the focus here is starting in sentence number 2, which states, alternatively, you may choose to research the caves below Stormhole by traveling to Stoneways or the Percolating Mire and completing a town encounter recommended by day 6, and we're actually on day 5, so we're 1 day ahead of things, which is great news. During the town encounter, you must take a group town action to discard a number of legendary loot equal to the number of characters and gain 1 XP during that day's reward phase, and then proceed to quest step C23. This will make the final quest step easier. So in this example, even though there were 2 encounters that potentially could trigger here, the guild quest encounter actually tells us to go ahead and resolve a town encounter. So essentially, based on the order of operations, we're now going to continue into a town encounter. So we check in the Gazetteer the Stone Waste town, and it states in its flavor text, though others might see Stone Waste as a lowly river village, its residents are proud of their home. They are guarded by the legendary warriors known as the Four Winds, who recently reunited to fight off a new threat to the town they love. Now it states underneath this, train with the Four Winds. After populating trainers, the party may replace any and I'll talk about that icon in a second, type skill lines from the trainers with randomly drawn skill lines. If the party chooses to do this, the town square is closed for this encounter. And just to connect the dots on what I just read, those icons are constellations, and they're going to be found on the skill line reference card at the very bottom for each of the skills. So you'll see 3 different colors, red, yellow, and blue. Red is warrior, yellow is thief, and blue is mage. So going back to the training with the Four Winds statement, it says after populating trainers, the party can replace any non-warrior type constellation skill lines from the trainers with randomly drawn warrior skill lines. If the party chooses to do this, the town square is closed for this encounter. So essentially, you can remove the mage and the thief skill lines from the randomly drawn ones to pull more of the warrior ones into the fray. Now the kicker is, if you choose to do this, the town square is shut down and closed, and as it states here, you wouldn't be able to hire a Sharp Eyes Mercenary, which has a group tag there. It says level 10 Argonian Stalker becomes a companion controlled by the party. At the end of the next battle, return it to its enemy bag. So basically that option would cease to exist if you take advantage of training with the Four Winds. Now you're also going to notice a number of things in this town are closed. The inn is closed, the quest board, the guild kiosk, and the alchemy station are all closed up, but there are some wares to look at and there are some trainers available. It appears there are some very interesting items here in Stone Waste. We got a night bow, we have a barbaric hickory shield, and we have some knuckle bones. The common ones are on the very top, so you can read these if you're interested. And then the final one is the legendary. I also went ahead and drew up the 4 trainers which are available, and again, as I mentioned earlier, we can train with the Four Winds to adjust what's going on here with those trainers, but I'm not really going to focus on that right now. It's the guild quest I'm focused on and maybe taking some of these items. For the guild quest, we have to take what's known as a group town action, where everybody contributes one of their 2 actions as part of a town encounter for this group town action. So basically, we're burning 1 for each character, and during this, we need to discard a number of legendary items for the party in total equal to the number of characters in the party. Now across my 3 characters, I've got 3 legendary items. Easy to tell as you flip them over, you can see the icon for legendary in the back side. So these are the 3. I have to go ahead and discard 2 of them right now, and I have to choose which one I want to keep. I've got to hold on to that mask. It is just too cool. We're going to go ahead and discard these 2 to complete the guild quest and continue it forward. That's awesome. We completed the quest. It's worth noting we gain 1 XP, which we'll gain in the rewards phase later in the day. But for now, we move in the Gazetteer to C23, which has some flavor text stating, the elderly Argonian woman you track down is happy for the company. Not many people are in the market for tales of the past these days, nor do they care for the future, which the past can foretell and interpret, she says. They only care about the now. She explains that the tome is a volume on uses for the minerals colloquially known as Stormhold crystals, rare, volatile rocks that can be found deep underground in the Shadowfen region, particularly in the area of Stormhold. Some believe that these crystals can harness the power of evil itself, she explains. Anyone who possesses that book must carefully steward the secrets within. Before you go, she provides you with some old map fragments that help make sense of the area's labyrinthine tunnels. She also gives you a word of warning. Some gray-robed folks were here only a few days ago asking around about the codex themselves, she says. I didn't tell them much. They seemed a bad sort, but if you want that book, you better be ready to fight for it. The quest objective states to travel to Stormhold, which is our main objective and has been since the beginning, and proceed to quest step D24 for that day's encounter. Recommended by day 12, we're going to aim to do that, initiating a delve and the end of the quest. So again, it's worth mentioning, as you go through the game, you're going to see more interesting quest lines. This is very much the very first one you're going to go through, but there will be twists and turns in the others that you'll check out and see as you go. So some of the quest objectives may even alternate or change as you go through the game. We're back to the town encounter. Each of my characters have a single action to spend left in the town, and we've got some cool shop items here, and we just discarded legendary items, so our inventory has opened up a bit. Remember, when you go into delves and battles, you can actively equip up to 4 items at one time. Well, I've got enough here that if each of them take another card here from the shop, we'll have a total across the party of 8 cards, and then I can try to mix and match them to make sure that I can actually actively use all of them in the future. Now, my Argonian definitely uses a stance that is more up close and personal than my Dark Elf, so I think the ability here on the Barbaric Hickory Shield would be really good for my Argonian, so I'm going to take that one. The Dark Elf has 1 action left, and honestly, as cool as the Nightwood Bow is, I do like the Knuckle Bones because I can actually make use of it right now. If I take this as an action, which is my final action in the town phase, it says here, during the town encounter, shuffle this item into the common item deck and draw a legendary item, which means I can go ahead and discard and do this right now the second I obtain it. Check out what the Dark Elf ended up with. A Glyph of Potion Boost. Very cool. It's an enchantment, has the keyword environmental. It states, enchant all adventurers. When any adventurer would expend a potion, they may instead return it to their pack unexpended. That is really cool. And when any adventurer takes an in-town action, you discard this enchantment. So how enchantments work is essentially they'll sit inside your inventory until you use them, and once you do use them, they come out of your inventory and essentially attach to the components that they're actually enchanting. So in this case, it'd be enchanting both of the characters. You could put it off to the side, but some of them might enchant maybe, for instance, a specific item or weapon or something, some component of gameplay. So you essentially just tie the enchantment next to whatever you're enchanting, and then it doesn't count towards your inventory limits, which is good to know. Now, the kicker here is this one affects potions, and unfortunately, as part of the 2 that I discarded for the quest, I actually got rid of one of the potions, which now tied with this glyph would have been absolutely awesome, because this would allow me to automatically succeed a lockpick, and then it could have just recharged with the enchantment, and I could have really just gotten a lot of good loot. So I just missed out on things. Now, this is a nice lessons learned moment, because I could have actually gone ahead and done this whole thing before I did the group action to actually move the guild quest ahead, and probably would have been a smarter decision. But it is what it is, and it still is a good card to have in our inventory for potential future use, so the Dark Elf is still happy. He just wishes he hadn't got rid of his potion now at this point. So we're going to move now past the encounter phase and into the reward phase. Within the rewards phase, we gain the XP we talked about earlier for pushing the guild quest ahead. We get 1 XP, so our party XP is going to go up on the dial from 8 to 9, and also each of the characters is going to gain XP on their mat, moving their markers. Now we can choose to untrain skill lines if we wish, which I'm not going to do, but at this point I want to start gaining advancements. I want to look to see if there's anything I want to spend that 1 XP on. We can also choose to, again, hold up to 3 XP and just use it at a later date. Now, the main things I can use XP on are things like going ahead and picking up a new attribute token to potentially go into a row. So, for instance, I could up my health up to 7, putting a red one in here. Again, going left to right, it's going to be all the white ones in terms of the cost. Going from right to left, it'll be black going across. So I can not only add an attribute to a skill line that actually ties to one of the major attributes, but if it has to do with a skill, then I can go ahead and add a die from that particular skill reference sheet. But I do have to follow the levels in order. So in other words, if I don't currently have a level 1 die in here, I can't jump to a level 2 die right away. I have to have at least 1 level 1 die in there, and then I can start incrementing my way up the chart. So if we take a look at the heavy armor, which is a skill that I trained right up here in the top right hand corner, this sheet tells us what we can pick up at level 1. There are 2 options here. We have resolve and constitution as dice. So for 1 XP here, I could go ahead and choose to take one of these dice, and you'll see each of the dice has a number available. So resolve, there's 2 of them you can potentially pick up over the course of time if you want, and it has a cooldown effect, which is why there's a C in purple there, and it says, while this die is in your cooldown track, when you are dealt damage by an adjacent enemy, you can prevent that much damage. The damage represented as the X, and that is going to be based on the result you roll. So whenever you see this on the skill line, you'll see not only the die that it's talking about, but all 6 sides of that die, so you can quickly make an interpretation as to whether or not it's going to be a good die for your character. Now, between resolve and constitution, there is really the major difference being non-adjacent and adjacent. So essentially, the resolve one's going to deal with enemies that are adjacent to you. The constitution one will deal with enemies that are non-adjacent to you. So for this character, being that it likes to be up close and personal, it's likely the resolve side of the equation we want to go after. It's as simple as that. I've chosen to spend 1 XP to add a single die for this skill line. Now I actually have something for that skill line, and this resolve die should come in handy. Now that I picked up a level 1 die, in the future I can start entertaining level 2 dice for this skill line. Now, beyond going ahead and upping your attributes for a given stat or potentially adding dice to skill lines, you can also upgrade your cooldown track. So again, if you spend the required amount for that stat to increase, which would be 3 for the next position, then I can cool down more dice every single turn, which of course gets more dice back into my character board, making me more efficient overall. So at a certain point, we really need to focus on that. It'll likely be the next thing I save towards. Now, taking a look at the Dark Elf here, there's only one position on the entire map that currently is available for 1 XP, and that's going to be the attribute boost for this stat, which is my health stat. So if I go ahead and take this, I spend 1 XP, and I can put a health bump in there, and that will increase my maximum health, which is definitely a good thing. It's not a bad thing. I'm tempted to do it, but I really do want to focus on that cooldown. So maybe what I'll do is I'll hold on to that XP, and we'll start saving towards that in the future. You'll notice, because I don't have stats in here, I should say skills in here, trained, I can't make use of these going from right to left, but I can certainly make use of them from these ones going over from left to right, but they're going to cost 2 XP just to start them, so I can't even get any further down this row right now. And up here, same situation, I just don't have any ability to spend 2 XP to get those other ones filled in. So that's all I'm going to do for now. We're going to keep that XP for this character and move on. We're inside the end of day phase, so at this point, we check to see whether we had a peaceful encounter during this day, which we did not. We referenced that card for the weather change if we did, but in this case we didn't, so we're going to go ahead and grab this card off the top, flip it over, and see what the icon is on the other side. And unfortunately, that icon ties to flooding, so for the first time, the weather is going to change to a flooding scenario. The party's base overland movement is now 2, and when gaining fatigue to push in overland movement, adventurers have to gain over fatigue instead of light fatigue, so it makes it really tough to move a lot of distance. On a very positive note, we're going into the Adventurer's Rest, which means I can cool down all the dice in my cooldown tracks, clearing them completely out, and I can also regain that combat die for my Argonian. We have the ability to heal up to 2, but we currently don't need to, so we're good there. Now we can choose to exchange any items we want to. I've done a quick exchange between the characters. I've given the Mammoth Snout Pie from the Argonian over to the Dark Elf. And I have no intention of using the Guild Assist at this point, so that's going to wrap up the day and end off day number 5. And that's going to wrap up part number 1 of the Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era from Chip Theory Games. Having a lot of fun with you guys going through this one. Currently, in this video, we completed day 4 and 5. I already completed the 3 days of the Dized tutorial for a total of 5 days. And we made it from Lil Moth, which is way down here, all the way up to Stone Waste. And these 2 last days were really focused on getting our characters ready for the journey, and likely lots of combat that's going to come as we leave Stone Waste and head up to Stormhold. So if you're somebody coming into this video and you're wondering where the combat is, don't worry, there's lots of it as we explore further outside the towns in the very near future. Let me know any comments and questions down below in the comments, and also if you're not part of the Discord community or part of our Facebook group to talk about this solo game and many others, definitely check them out. You'll find links for those in the pinned comment and video description. Thanks again for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.